Yeah, this is Jack. I wanted to create this video for other instructors in the Management 460 class to show them how to set up CapSim for the students. I have already created my account and logged on to it. Whenever you log on to it as a professor, the first thing you're going to see is a screen like this that has all of your courses listed. And so these are the ones that are still active. Your inactive ones, once the expiration date passes, they move to inactive, and you can still get in there and see information on them. And at some point they'll be archived, usually about 6 months after they finish. And so some of them may move to that, but right now we're on the active. I'm setting up courses right now for Management 460 Spring 2017. I've already set them up for a couple of groups, but that way I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing, because you only do it once a semester. So I'll get ready to do it again. I use CapSim slightly differently than it was, I guess, designed, and you'll see that as we go through. CapSim was set up with the idea that there would be what they call an industry, and so an industry is a group of 6 companies that can compete against each other, and then inside of those companies you would have more than one student inside of each company, and so they would be group companies, if you will. And I have found in my experience that the students actually do better and learn more when each of them manages a different company. The result of that is that, for example, this semester across the 2 sections that I have 38 students. I need to set up multiple groups or industries, and each of these is called an industry. Each course has an industry in it, and so I'm setting up multiple of those, and each of those groups will either have 4 or 3 students that can register in it, as opposed to how we used to do it, where you would set up one industry and say, oh, there's going to be 40 students in this industry, and you would put 10 of them in a group, and they would each manage a company, or 8 of them in a group and they would manage a company, and there'd be 5 groups. Usually it's a good idea when you're setting these things up for you to have at least one computer run group, particularly during the early stages and the practice rounds. The computers are good but not great competitors, and so in the beginning when students are learning, it's very good for them to be able to gauge themselves against a good competitor. Sometimes none of the students are good competitors, only the computer is doing well, and so they can kind of learn from it what's going on. So I usually set my industries up with no more than 4 companies that are run by students, and therefore 2 companies run by the computers. So from here we're going to launch a new course, and it asks you to basically say, hey, as the professor, it's your job to make sure that every student registers. You can't have one student register and then have 5 students all working in the same company. Just work off of that one login. That's the company gets paid. So yeah, we agree. I'm going to go ahead just because it shortcuts it. Well, you can go ahead, I should say, and just select a something that you've already set up, and it'll fill some of the information out. I'm not going to do that. I will just say start using the wizard, and we'll go from there. Because it knows what account I'm in, it already knows a lot of things about me. It asks me about the campus, and that's so that it tracks its stuff. Is it a classroom or online? I'm teaching a classroom. You can enter a title here, and then you can change it later on if you want. I'm calling it Management 460 Spring 2017, and you can see I've already got some of those. This will be group 3 because I've already set 2 of them up. This section number is really a text field. I'm combining 2 sections this time so that they're sort of commingled in the competition. and so I can put both sections in there. One of the sections is on Mondays, the other's on Thursdays, so I'll just click both. It's an undergraduate degree credit class. This group will have 4 in it. And my start dates for this, I am picking that it will start on the first day of the semester and end on the last day of finals. You have to pick a start date that's early enough so that your students can see it. Nobody will be able to see the course before its start date, other than the instructor. And so you want to make sure they can get into it. As far as the end date, the students stop being able to see what's in it after the end date. And since I like them to be able to refer back to that for some of the other stuff that they may do during finals, I go ahead and just make it the end date be the last day of finals. We use the capstone. It costs $53.99 to the student. We don't get the book bundle with it. We have a textbook that we use in the class. Obviously, you guys can take a look at those books, and if you want to use them, that's great. But we use the capstone. If you want to understand the difference between the choices, they give you some information on that. Okay. There's a free ethics plugin, which we always include. CapSim is a smaller version of the simulation and a bunch of quizzes that are done at the end of the competition, and we use that to sort of assess how the kids have learned and how our students compare to other folks who are using this test. And so we usually do it. Again, the student pays for it. It's $15. We get reports on it. We use the CapSim because it's consistent with the level of the capstone that we're using. The CapSim Basic is really designed more like a pre-test, and so it might be a test for students that have not taken the class yet, and you just want to be able to compare sort of before and after, how much do they know. So we're using the CapSim, and I'll just click continue. Do you want any of the e-texts? Again, you guys can look at that and decide. I don't generally use those. The students pay online, so that's why that one's selected. Again, I find that the students prefer the electronic PDF. They don't really want a paper copy. They don't charge us anything extra for the paper copies, so if you want them, send them. But they don't charge for those. So kind of there you go. Now, if you want your printed professor guide, which has got a little bit more in it than the others, then you can click this. Remember, I'm setting up multiple groups here, so if I keep clicking that ultimately I figured out I'm going to need 8 groups of 4 and 2 groups of 3. If I click this every time, I'm going to wind up with 10 copies of the professor guide. I don't need that, so I'm just going to click it this time and then not do it every time. And here's sort of a review, just sort of making sure that you understand what you've asked for, and you say create the course. Now it wants you to go set it up. Now you can either do it later or you can set it up now. I'll go through setting it up now so that you can see that as well. First thing it wants to know is what kind of scenarios. I use the standard scenarios. Part of the reason for that is that each of these other scenarios has some uncertainty associated with it, and so it's not exactly comparable from group to group. And since I want to be able to compare performance from one group to the other across the whole class, that's why I prefer that. Again, there's some details down here if you want to make a decision differently. Customizations, same sort of thing. There's the opportunity for you to randomize. It creates more uncertainty as you go through, but then you can't compare as cleanly from one group to another, so I don't randomize. Again, how many students in here? In this one, it'll be 4. You have 2 choices down here as it relates to the tournament. We typically do a tournament. The difference between, just so you know, the difference between a tournament and a foot race In a tournament, you set up a schedule, the simulation runs in 8 rounds. You set up a date and time when each round will process, and the students have to get their decisions in, submit them, and have them available by the time that processes. And so you really control the pace of when they do what. The foot race is set up so that when a student joins a company, they basically can make their decisions, click and go forward, move to the next round, the next round, the next round, and in that way they can kind of get through quickly. I had considered maybe using foot races for the first time students go through, but it turns out that you can only do one or the other, and you can't change back and forth, and the student would basically have to pay twice. And so that's not a good thing. The downside to the foot race basically is that because they're all moving at the same pace, or at their own pace, they're not competing against each other. They're all only competing against computers. So we always pick a tournament. You don't really have that option yet, but we always pick the tournament. More importantly, what this is asking is when the student, once this course is created, your students are gonna sign up for the CapSim and pay their money and everything else, and they're gonna go into a particular industry ID, which I'll show you what that is in here in a minute. And when they get to it, they have you can either let them pick what team they're going to be on, or you can not let them pick and you make the assignments. I have in the past let them pick. I've set it up to let them pick, but I've told them which team they're supposed to be in, and somebody always screws it up. So this time I'm just not going to let them pick. They will get into the industry they're supposed to be in, then I will assign them, and I think that'll be cleaner for everybody. All right, so again, here you're basically going through your configurations a little bit more specifically. It provides you some default ones. I don't like the default ones because, for example, with a group of 4 students, it assumes that each of those students is going to want to run a company, or that they're going to pair up, I guess. And so there's going to be 2 students in a group, and so it's just going to assign them to 2 companies. And that's not what I want. I want them to be in their own. So I'm going to set them up using my own capstone tournament. This is where you would decide whether you're doing tournament or foot race, and so I'm doing tournament. So what I want to do is I want the participants in Andrews, Baldwin, Chester, and Digby. You'll find that the companies are all named alphabetically, A, B, C, D, E, F, and I like using A, B, C, and then D if there's going to be 4 of them for the human participants, and then I'll let the computers be the other. A couple of subtleties here. First, you'll see computer difficulty. I can make it weak, average, or strong. I have set the others up as average, so I'll set this as average. I can change that from round to round if I want to, so I can sort of bump it up and make the computer a more aggressive competitor whenever I want. We only need 1 industry here. This says that we were top 10 eligible. I'll talk to you about that here in just a minute. But the other thing is that for the computers, you can pick which strategy you want them to be in. I guess I take that back. It looks like you can't pick it here. You can do it once this is set up. Right now the default is that Erie is going to be a niche cost leader. Ferris is going to be a niche differentiator. That's terminology that's sort of CapSim specific, although it does have its place in strategic management. Whatever you do, whichever strategies you pick, it's a good idea to keep the same strategies across all of your groups. Again, what you're trying to do is create a similar type playing field. The only thing different is who they're competing against. So we'll go ahead and continue here. All right. So ideally, we want things that are top 10 eligible. And the reason we want that is we want to be able to compare ourselves against others at other schools. And so to do that, you have to set this up particular way. For example, the way that you'll see this later with the simulation, we can discuss this, but it has basically 4 decision components. It has research and development, marketing, human resources, and production. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It has research and development, marketing, production, and finance. And that's what you start out with. And then once you've gone around, it adds human resources as a module, and so that's a new set of decisions for you to make. You could move that back and say, well, I want them to have to make those decisions in round 1. You're no longer top 10 eligible. You could move it to round 3. It'll say, okay, you're still eligible, right? So it's going to let you do them in round 2 or anything later and make it eligible. If you let your team start making HR decisions in round 1 when a bunch of other people don't get to make those decisions, you're giving your team a leg up on everybody else, and so that's sort of constrained. The total quality management is a 6th set of decisions that get made. The earliest you can do those is round 3. You'll see if you pick round 2, they're not top 10 eligible, so we'll start them in round 3. That way you sort of have all the stuff that they need to know to get started in round 1, and then by the time they get to round 2, they're adding something new, and they get to round 3, they're adding something new. We have not historically used the labor negotiations or the advanced marketing. You could. And you can start that whenever you want, obviously, by clicking the boxes. That doesn't seem to affect the top 10 eligible. Same thing with the advanced marketing. We just have not, and so I've already set others up not using that. But again, down here you can see what all of those are, and you can decide on whether you want to do that or not. So, kind of here's our setup. We're tournament style. We have 1 industry. We have the first 4 as participants, 2 as computers. Difficulty is average. HR starts in round 2, TQM in round 3. Create the industry. All right, so it shows up here as group 3. You're going to want to keep track of this number, this C85879 in this example. That number is what you need to give to the student. It's called the industry ID. You're going to need to give that to the students so that when they register, they'll need that number in order to be put into the right company. So in advance, you'll basically, on a spreadsheet or whatever, have to figure out which student you want to put into which industries and which teams you want to assign them to. And there we go. I will have a spreadsheet I can show you guys for that. I won't have a video for that. Anyway, that's it.